Hi, this is Preetika Rao. Welcome to my podcast. Today I have with me Dr. Anoop Kumar, who is a medical emergency doctor from Washington, D.C. He's also written 2 books, Michelangelo's Medicine and Is This a Dream? But today we're not going to be speaking about medical emergencies and medicines. We're going to be speaking about spiritual experiences, especially his out-of-body experiences and experiences with Shirdi Sai Baba. So this is going to be a treat for all the Shirdi Sai Baba devotees, and I hope you love this episode. So stay tuned. So Dr. Anoop Kumar, thank you so much for joining me today. You have flown specially from Banaras to Mumbai for this podcast. When it comes to out-of-body experiences, there are people who speak about it. I have had a lot of comments on my podcast. People saying that I've had this experience with Devi and that experience with out-of-body. But I don't really, I don't really invite these people on my podcast and say, okay, let's talk about it. But you called me. You are an emergency doctor from Washington, D.C. You have a background and you have this medical background, which is all about science and probing in.
Yeah.
And it's not very often that you come across doctors speaking about an out-of-body experience.
Yeah.
So I want to know, what was your age? Where were you? And what exactly happened when you had this out-of-body experience?
I think that's so important for doctors to speak up, and that's the main reason I'm doing it, because people generally think that medical science or science is incompatible with this kind of experience, and I think it's not. So I was actually at home. It was during medical school. I was back home for a mini break for a few days at my parents' house, and I was in my bedroom and I was reading something. And when I was reading this, something caught my interest, and I was just kind of thinking it over. And before I knew it, it was like an explosion went off. Literally, like as if everything just blew up, including the body, the room, etc., everything. And it's strange, but the only way I can describe what that experience was afterwards, it was like I was sitting in the sun. And it sounds strange. I don't even know how I came up with that phrase, but nothing else seems right. And I was sitting in the sun, but it wasn't hot. It wasn't burning as we might experience the sun or expect it to be. It was brilliant blaze, like a brilliant orange saffron color. And there was an indescribable peace, let's say truth, stillness. Everything just seemed right, felt right. And I don't know how long it lasted, but then at some point, I remember feeling like that was it, and I'm going to move forward. I'm going to move beyond that. And what happened next is I was going through, it felt like a portal. It felt like the sun was a portal. And as I was moving through that and just about to complete that moving through process, a being of light appeared, as though made of the sun itself, this being of light. Another brilliant orange blaze, and instilled this thought in my mind, which was that this wouldn't be fair and there's more work to be done. And in that moment, I knew that if I took one more step, that would be it. There would be no coming back to this world.
Okay.
But I also knew that there was a deep truth in what this being had said, and when you hear something true, you can't ignore it. And so when I paused, when I heard that, it's like everything re-imploded. And I came back to the room, I came back to the body, but everything had changed. The way I saw changed, the way I perceived changed, thinking had changed. And it's been a process since then.
So this entire description that you just gave, you said that there was a being there, right? Who was the being and what did that being look like? Was it just light, or was it just, you just felt a presence? What was it?
Okay, so imagine that everything you see is just brilliant orange. Okay, so that's all one can see is brilliant orange. Doesn't matter which way you turn, up, down, left, right, it's just brilliant, amazing orange. Now imagine that out of that orange, it's almost like a smaller blaze made of the same stuff, looking the exact same way. It didn't have a body, it didn't have like any noticeable head, arms, didn't have any noticeable shape. It was just like as if there was a brilliant orange and like a piece or a part of that orange almost like stepped forward, or you could see it against the rest of that blaze. And that's the best way I can describe it. And looking back, I can say it was so much more intelligent than me, so much more advanced, so much more capable, so much more loving, so much more wise, so much more everything in every way, such that it knew everything that was happening with me. It knew why I was there. It knew all the restlessness I had experienced in my life that had brought me to that moment. And it also knew what was to come and what had to be done. And all that it could communicate without speaking, without nothing, just by kind of dropping a thought into my mind.
That I know everything about you.
No, I'm kind of surmising that. It never said that. All it said is, this wouldn't be fair. There's more work to do. But to say that, you have to know all of this, right? So it became clear to me that in retrospect, how loving and wise and vast this being was, whatever this is.
So it's like, say we are far, and then we suddenly, enter the home and we see our parents and we immediately recognize them to be somebody who just know everything about us.
Yeah.
So it was just that kind of a feeling, right?
That's actually a great description. It's a beautiful description because it's literally like, it's as if you lost your parents when you were first born, and you lived your life, and it's as if everybody did. So it wasn't strange to lose your parents. Imagine a society like that where everybody lost their parents, so everybody thinks it's normal. And then one day in your 20s, you meet your parents and you realize like the whole backstory, like how the society is, what it thinks, what is actually true. And then, I mean, you just run headlong towards that, right? Because you're like, oh my God, everything makes sense now. And then when you come back to this world, there is still that longing, there's that deep longing because you know now. And so I think like everything you do in a sense kind of changes.
So I believe that there are so many different realms, that you can tap into. Do you think you ended up tapping into just one of these realms? Or do you think it was that final journey that you say after death and God? What was it exactly?
So my perspective on this has changed. I see now that what happened then was a key part of my lifetime. So it wasn't an accident. It wasn't happenstance. It was a kid, when I was growing up, I was exposed to Advaita Vedanta when I was a kid. And that was like my first school. My parents were heavily into it. I was sitting in the Upanishad classes when I was in elementary school. And I felt like this is real stuff. This is about the world. It's about me. It's about mind. It's real stuff. It's not stuff at school. It just seems so boring and like out of a textbook, So I had been like experimenting and grappling and struggling with this literally my whole life. It was so meaningful and deep for me. And so even though at the time I was like, what in the world just happened? But looking back, I know it was exactly supposed to happen right then, because that revealed to me something that has meaning in the rest of my life. And so what that revealed, to get your question, it gave me enough of a taste of what is actually going on here. And it opened up the mind in a way that it didn't close again. So since then, yes, I've experienced all kinds of realms, and it's much more under my control now as to what I experience and what I don't. But in that moment, it was one particular portal, one particular view, and that was enough. If there were more than that, I probably wouldn't be here now, So it's almost like a taste of something that you get. And like if you take one bite of a mango, you don't need to eat 10 mangoes. In that one bite, all those things. And then in time, you can develop. You can try this one, you can try that one. So it was something like that.
Did you see yourself trying to, pray to that being that you saw or that connected with you? Or did you not feel the need to do that?
No, I felt like it was a good friend. You know, it's not like a being that I would pray to. It is a being that I would show gratitude for, you know. Even now, as I think, like, I know this being is aware of me and many beings, you know. And so I just have such a tremendous gratitude for that and for what this world is and for what is actually happening and the guidance and all that stuff. So yeah, I wouldn't pray to it, but certainly if he, she, this were in front of me, I would do namaste and I would say thank you, you know.
Any more experiences similar to this after?
Innumerable. So that's like the one that opened the door. And I have to say, so afterwards, what happened is I was back sitting in the room, but like everything had changed. So it looked like the room was made out of light. So here, for example, you can see in the background, you can see the walls and everything. And then here, it looks like space, right? Like between my hands now is space.
Yes.
But what I saw then is that this space is actually made out of something. It's not an emptiness. It's not a void. It's not just nothing between two walls. It's actually constructed out of light. And that became very clear. And so are the walls. So it's this light that is constructing itself in a sense, or refracting as the world. So I'm just sitting here and being like, oh, so this is like what is going, oh, this is what the Upanishads were saying. Oh, this is what the Tantrics are saying. And this, you know, these kinds of things. So I walked into the bathroom that I'd used for decades, you know, or a couple decades. And I looked in the mirror and I didn't recognize the person because so much had changed. You know, so much of my life until that point had been characterized by this search, this deep need, want, like what is true? I always felt like something more, something more, something more. And when that got quenched, when I was just like drenched in Amrita, you know, it's like it quenches everything. You change a lot. Like your expressions change. The micro, you know, expressions on your face change. The tone of your voice changes. Your posture changes. All of these are like indicative of a certain frequency or a certain state of being. And when that changed, I didn't recognize the guy. I was like, that guy looks too happy. That guy looks too peaceful to be me. So that was the beginning. And then after that, I started my training in emergency medicine. And it was, I can get into that if you like, but that was a very difficult process of now trying to integrate an entirely different life. But after that came then the ability to use the different dials in our consciousness to kind of access differently and integrate differently.
So this experience happened to you. Did you try to discover more people who've had similar experiences, or try to meet psychics or people, you know, in that stream, just to understand what had happened to you? Or did you go to a guru?
So this is the amazing part. Okay, so what was amazing is that was around my late 20s. Okay, so for over 20 years by that point, I had been interested in Advaita Vedanta, and I'd been studying it. I had spent so much time with Swami G's who had been practicing it, who made it their life, you know, who were teachers, who were young brahmacharis that became swamis and then became senior teachers. I'd seen so much of this and fortunately learned so much that I knew at that point, you know, I almost, as crazy as it sounds, I almost ignored that experience as something significant for years, probably 10 years or more. In fact, I only started speaking about it just a few years ago. And that is because I had heard since I was a child, this stuff happens. When it happens, it's not that big a deal. Like, don't make too big a deal of it, pomp and circumstance. And, you know, it's part of what happens, but everything comes after, how you integrate, how you channel that. And so because of that, I didn't try to have like mystical experiences. I didn't try to use it in any particular way. I was just living my life. And then eventually it was very difficult. So there was a Swamiji who was nearby that I would go to every so often. And I'd be like, the conversations were amazing. I'd be like, my mind, I don't think in the same way. Like, I don't think. And he's like, yeah, that's never going to come back. So, okay. You know, it's nice to have an expert, because you can't go to a doctor for that. You can't go to most people, even other people who have experienced it. it's different when you just experience it and it's something cool and phenomenal, but it's different when you're now 70 and it happened to you decades ago, right? Which is like something like the Swami G. So he's like, yeah, don't worry, but that's not coming back. I was like, okay, it's like a finality, it's a period, you know it, and so it doesn't faze you anymore. And sometimes I had an extremely hard time as I started my emergency medicine training, because on top of that, now my sleep is, I'm working 36 hours straight. My food is terrible. I had just gotten married just before that. And I'm seeing gunshot wounds and stab wounds and heart attacks and strokes and babies that need resuscitation. It was super, super difficult for like the first 6 months to a year of my residency. And even after that, it got a little bit easier. But that's when I was like, okay. And that's when other things started opening up too. And I was like, okay, I got to get a handle on this soon. And that's when I kind of developed a method to stabilize and integrate, which I still do today.
Who is this Swami Ji? Would you be able to tell us?
I don't want to say his name because I don't think he would want his name said. He's just a dude living his life. Like, he doesn't care much about, all this kind of stuff. So the reason I'm speaking about it now, even though initially I thought it's not important, don't give importance to that, is because especially in my profession, and especially people who value their rationality and their science, it's often thought that this is just mysticism or this is just spirituality. But what I want to show is that I don't think there's a real divide between spirituality and science and practical experience. When we note that in science, the subjective lens that we use to look at the world is just as important as the thing that we're looking at. That's so critical. And we all know that when you use a microscope, if the lens isn't adjusted, it's all blurry. You don't see anything, right? But you adjust the lens and now you see the cell right in front of you. And so similarly, when we adjust our minds, when we adjust our awareness, when we adjust our frequency, and it's doable for anyone. So just to show that you can have these experiences and they can be integrated with science and they make sense. That's why I started talking about it. And I think especially being in emergency medicine and being an emergency doctor, I feel like I have a responsibility, honestly, because a lot of suffering in this world, including my patients, I think is because we're given such small stories about who we are and what this world is. If you're an amazing being and you're always told, well, you're a body and you're a bunch of protons, neutrons, and electrons, and that kind of does it. You're born, then you'll die. That's not going to feel good. And I think that actually causes illness. So that's why I started talking about this.
Would you have, or can I ask you if you have tapped into other realms?
Yes. So initially, involuntarily, because I didn't know what the heck I was doing. But as I learned to stabilize, just to survive, frankly, like I was like, it's like being on a roller coaster and just hanging on and trying to figure out how to bridle the stallion rather than letting it take you for a ride. But eventually it became like manageable and under my control, I would say. So I remember once, let's say, going to a dimension and seeing a wall that was like a security key code, right? Like a keypad. And it's like there were either 9 or 16, I don't remember. So either 4 across and 4 down or 3 across and 3 down. And each was like a pad and each had a scribble on it, some kind of writing. And I didn't recognize the language. So what's interesting here, Preetika, is there's actually 2 of me in this. So there's the character that's visiting this dimension and there's me as Anoop, right? So both awarenesses are there. So the Anoop awareness is like, what is this thing? I don't recognize this thing, right? But the character that I am knows what that is and goes boop, 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 like presses the right things and it just kind of opens. And then I moved into this realm, really strange. It looked like beings that were lemurs, these animals that are lemurs on top, but like human body on the bottom. And I remember there was a queen and what I would describe as a queen and let's say her people around, and one of her people was fanning her like this. And then what happened is, so there are these 2 awarenesses, right? So one knows what it's doing, etc. And the other one's like, what is this and why am I here? And that what is this, why am I here started to take over. And when that happened, this other part of me had to leave. So I left that, let's say, that dimension at that point. I remember another one.
If I can interrupt you.
Yeah, sure.
Where were you when this happened? Because a lot of people might think, was he sleeping? Was he dreaming? So where were you when this happened?
So lying down but awake. So after this experience in medical school, there are all kinds of energies surging through me and surging around me. And depending on how one uses their energy, like where they locate it and how much intensity they give to it, it's like a magnifying glass with rays. If you use it to focus the rays on a certain point, then you can do different things with your body. So often when it comes to the Agnya Chakra and you focus there, then you can start to access different things. And so this was lying down at night, but awake in the bed and, let's say, visiting places.
What would you say to people who say that maybe you think you were awake, but you were dreaming?
I would say we're all dreaming right now. I mean, the whole idea that there is something called the waking state and the dreaming state, I think that's a misconception. There are only two states. There's projection and non-projection. Non-projection is sleep, and projection is waking, daydreaming, sleep. Remember, all these words are from our society's perspective. They're not actually true. They're kind of guesses. So I don't have any problem saying that. It's kind of like when we talk about hallucinations in medicine. You know, we might see somebody and say, well, that's a hallucination. I have a problem with that. You know, and I see psychiatric patients in the ER. I have a problem with saying that's a hallucination. That's what they're seeing. You know, if you ask a bat to look at me now, the bat will not see what you see. The bat uses sonar. If you ask a cat, it has a different vision. So we're all hallucinating. You know, I'm not making light of psychiatric hallucinations that cause suffering. There can be suffering, but let's not use that to say that that's a hallucination and what we're seeing is real. No, we are having a kind of collective hallucination. The question is, what is the relevance of that in our life, what we perceive? You know, is it useful? If not, then I should know how to put that away and not have to see that, have that kind of take over my life. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I think it's a much more easeful, integrated way of seeing the world. And if a person can start to experiment with this, projection and non-projection, I think a great deal of awareness and peace comes into your life.
Any other realms that you have tapped into?
So another one that I still go to now is what I would describe like a crystal city.
Still go to now, as in, do you have like access to it by will?
Yes. So I would describe it as a city made of glass or made of crystal. Basically, beautiful, smooth architecture. If you notice in our world, even if you look around here, so many 90-degree angles. Just think about it. And it's almost arbitrary. Like, why do we have so many 90-degree angles in our world? Like every corner of every room, you know, chairs, right? The back of the chair, 90 degrees. And it actually represents a kind of thinking. It's actually like if-then thinking. If this, then I'll either do this or either do that. That's if-then thinking. That's kind of materialized physically as the 90-degree angle. So it just shows like the culture of the mind in our world. This place has very few 90-degree angles. Everything is curved. Everything is smooth. You know, there are pyramids, and I guess the corner of the pyramid at the bottom might be 90 degrees, but 90 degrees is an exception. Smooth steeples, smooth round things, tapering down like this, you know, pyramids, a lot of circles, ovoids, spherical structures. It's just so relaxing and beautiful to see. And I know people who know architecture or know art know that your room and the shape of things in your room has an effect on our consciousness because everything is connected. So that's a place that I frequent that feels much more like home in a sense. And it brings great peace and joy for me.
Are there beings?
Yes, there are beings of light. So I wouldn't say definitely human forms, but I would say almost like humanoid light. Again, not a distinct form, just like I talked about the blaze. You can't see a perfect outline or anything like that, but just highly aware, beautiful, intelligent, loving beings.
So would you think that this is a planet? Because there are people who speak about, you know, Palladian dimension. Would it be something like that, or would it be another dimension altogether?
So that's a really good question. It's a really important one, okay? And let me try to give an example of that. So now people might be, let's say people are watching this conversation, right? One way they could think about it is that it's happening in another dimension. And what I mean by that is like they're seeing it on a screen, right? So, but it's not like we're actually sitting in that screen that they're seeing it on. We're actually somewhere totally different, maybe thousands of miles away, right? Sitting in another room somewhere. So is it another dimension? It kind of depends on your perspective. You could say that with our knowledge, they say, well, they're on Earth. We know they're in India. We know they're in Mumbai, so we can go there. So it's not. But that's because you have a certain type of thinking about that. So when you talk about the Pleiades, is the Pleiades another dimension? It is, because you can access it now. You don't have to get in a spaceship and go out of our galaxy or go out of our solar system to experience the Pleiades, right? So what I'm getting at is that everything that we consider physical, including this, including our bodies, including the abscess that I drain in the ER with the sharp scalpel, everything that we consider physical from a deeper level is purely energy and purely mental. And only when we see something incompletely do we start to believe that there is something that's just physical. Like the sofa, it's just a hard physical sofa here, or this body is just a body that's here. There's so much more to that. And so dimensions or planets, I think it's simply a matter of perspective. The simple answer is, yes, it's another planet, but it's accessible directly. It doesn't have to be through a spaceship.
So the way I see this is, just like a frog in a well has limited vision to even understand where he is. So he thinks that his home is this well, but he doesn't know that this well is in a little village in India. This India is a part of a continent and a world. The world is part of a universe. The frog has no vision or perception to understand that. We as humans, we have the vision and perception to understand that we are in a city, we're in a country, and then we belong to a, continent and the world at large. So it's all about perceptions. And I know, and I'm sure that beings from other dimensions have, the perception of not only our world, that is planet Earth, but also so many other,
Absolutely. I totally agree.
What do you think? I mean, was it some kind of activated chakra that you think has been activated that is making you see this? Is it like your Agya chakra is activated?
Yes. Yeah. So basically, with that kind of initial activation, I started to remember even activations earlier in my life that I'd forgotten about with that kind of bigger opening. And since then, it's been a process of managing this. Like every day, I'm doing it right now as we talk.
Really?
Yes. Where the attention is focused and how much intensity is given to that. So if I give more intensity, let's say here or here, I'll stop talking to you because I won't be accessing here as much.
Wow.
So I have to keep it in a particular range. And that's what I eat. It's what clothes I wear. It's who I'm around. It's the architecture. Everything is everything. Everything is connected. Everything affects everything. So, when people are like, I just don't feel good today, there's something around you, and this is not to get paranoid or anything. It's just true. Like you like some colors, they make you feel good. Some colors don't. Some days make you feel good. Some people don't make you feel good. It's all true. Like everything is true. And maybe that's overwhelming, but once you see that, you can manage your life so much better because you can see the slight subtleties. I need to change this. I need to adjust this. And it makes a big difference.
What would you say to people out there who are listening to you right now and who want to experience the same thing, that the same state, if I could say, that you are in right now?
So I'll say two things about that. One is there is an aspect to this that happens at the right time. Okay, so that it cannot be forced. And actually, if it's forced, it causes problems. Because I know a lot of people want to have Kundalini experiences and a lot of people are doing all kinds of things. But if you open those things up, especially from a place of lack, so if I'm lacking a sense of being cool and so I want to have some nice experience, or if I'm lacking love, like I don't feel loved and like I feel like I would be special or I can do some yoga or something like that, as opposed to like a reverence for life and knowing that life is so much more and this is my nature and I want to explore this, that's different. That doesn't have a pressure behind it, And to be honest, I had pressure. I wasn't trying to activate that, but I did have a lot of pressure because I just felt like this isn't right, something's not right, like something more, and so for me, it was a struggle for many years, and it was very difficult. I was very hugely fortunate to have Advaita and to have medical science and to know what to say to which person. Otherwise, I would have been given 10 diagnoses right off the bat, you know? So there is that spontaneous aspect. But the other aspect is what I said before. I talk about it as the four engines: nutrition, movement, connection, and rest. And the whole thing is this, is you can prepare the ground for something like this to happen, number one. And number two, you can prepare yourself to be ready for when it happens. So it's two different things. One is preparing for it to happen, and then preparing to be stable when it happens. Because otherwise, like me, when the rocket ship takes off and is going like this, you might be like, I can't manage this thing, right? So nutrition, movement, connection, and rest. Nutrition, number one, is hearing about this. I had 20 plus years of hearing about these kinds of things and thinking about them and studying and seeing how other people went through them. And so I had a pretty decent story of how things could happen. Even if it was a radically different experience, I had a pretty good story. Some people have this experience and they're like, I'm crazy. I can't talk to anybody about this. I never felt that, I felt like this is cool, this is amazing, and let me live my life. Because that's what I was told, like what you do, you keep living your life. So that's nutrition of the mind. Hearing stories like this of what is possible, hearing that this is normal. This is normal human development. This isn't something special. This isn't something crazy. This happens in this lifetime or the next or the next. It happens to everybody. It is part of the opening of the human being. So that's nutrition of the mind. So you have that infrastructure in place, that mental infrastructure in place, so you don't go nuts and you don't think it's crazy. Then nutrition of the body, which is cutting out the processed foods, eating plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables. That's the simplest part. There are all kinds of nuances, but the big picture is cutting out processed foods and eating plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables. That makes the mind more subtle and it makes it more stable. Some people don't like it because they're used to the in the food, and all that stuff, and I get that. But that made a huge difference for me. In residency, I was eating pizza and wings, chicken wings, and all this kind of stuff. And when I got out, I was like, I need to right this ship somehow. And I went cold turkey, like plant-based, and cut everything out, cut out even oil. And it was like 48 hours. The mind just went like stink. It just went like crystal clear. I was like, wow. And then I've added some things back. I'm not that stringent now, but that was absolutely critical to stabilize. So that's nutrition. Movement, everybody knows moving the body and everything, but I would say actually like massage, and you don't need a fancy masseuse. You can do it yourself. Like knees hold a lot of emotion.
Emotions.
Right? Yeah. Joints in general hold a lot of emotion because, like I said, there's nothing physical in this world. Everything that we think is physical is actually a fluctuating energy. So especially when you have a joint like your elbow, it's actually the meeting of two energies. So you're going to hold a lot more there, which is why people get arthritis in their knees, right? They hold a lot more. On the physical view, they hold a lot more. But that's actually a representation of emotion and feeling and all that kind of stuff. So if you literally just massage your knees every day, massage your feet are huge. That mind will get more subtle. You'll start to release things, right? Moving emotions is critical. I've seen so many diseases disappear when people had some trauma in their childhood and they reconcile with that. Crohn's disease disappears, other autoimmune conditions disappear. So that's movement. And there are other things. Movement of the breath is important rather than this shallow breathing, full like diaphragmatic breathing. And that also happens with opening up the chakras because then the breath becomes spontaneous and full rather than this kind of breathing.
Right.
Connection is a huge one. So connecting with others is a huge one. I know in spirituality, it's a lot about meditation, going inwards. That's true. And that's good to set the ground a little bit, but you need to be entangled with society. That's a critical thing. And that's something I learned through trial and error. Because you have to integrate, right? If you're just in your own world, as I was for so much of my life, just thinking and like meditating and experimenting and all this stuff. But then like, okay, you have an experience and maybe you get it, maybe things are good, but you can't function in the world. because everybody else is like, you're crazy, right? Or they're like, that doesn't make sense. Or how are you going to practice emergency medicine, right? So you need to have connections with people who are open-minded, so they're not going to criticize you, but they're also not going to buy everything you're saying, right? They're going to be like, I don't know about that. Maybe you were dreaming, like you said. You need that, because then you'd be like, okay, well, it was like this, and actually it was like this, and then you start to develop a shared understanding, a shared language, which I think is so critical. The other big thing about connection is connecting with the planet. Oh my God, Preetika, this is like the biggest biohack in the world for anything, for disease or spirituality or anything. We are totally disconnected from our planet. We got to get our shoes off and get our feet in the dirt, literally. And now we know the science behind it. We know there's electron transfer from the earth into the legs, and we call it grounding now. Of course, in India, we knew that for centuries, how important that is. It just feels good. It feels right. So at the ocean, at the beach, in the soil, getting your feet in the soil, sun on the skin is very important. What else? Eyes on the sky is a big one. Think about this. When you look around, so like when I look around this room, if I just do one glance, I could probably name 100 things. If you're very particular, right? Name 100 different things. But if you look at the sky, there's only one sky. And if you look at the sky here in India and I look at the sky in the United States, we're looking at the same sky. Maybe a different piece of it, but there's only one sky. And there's such a profound truth and beauty in that. When you look up, it tells you something about yourself at a subconscious level. And it activates that unity, it activates that beauty in you, even if you don't understand it. The more you look at the sky, the more peace you will experience. So that's another aspect of connection. And then rest. Rest is, of course, everybody knows sleeping. You got to rest well, you got to sleep well. But can you rest while talking? Can you rest while you're doing stuff? Can you rest in the ER while you're doing stuff, right? So that's a different kind of skill, to learn how to use that mind only for what's needed in that moment, and not to have all the other functions also kind of activated at the same time.
I should learn that, because I'm such a multitasker. I'm like doing literally three things at one time.
Well, there's going to be one that comes out in your awareness. You're always focusing on one. It's more like serial single tasking than multitasking, but you might switch closely enough that the other one is still kind of faded in the background, so it's occupying your CPU power, so to speak. It's like you're running multiple apps at the same time.
Yes.
Even though only one can be functional at that.
Yes, and I believe that our nervous system is not accustomed to multitasking, over centuries, because our multitasking has changed in the last few years.
Yeah.
The gadgets have changed, technology has changed.
Yeah. And it actually encourages, if you think about swiping on your phone between apps, it actually encourages a person to do that, as opposed to doing that, setting aside, doing the next thing, setting aside.
Right.
I can do half a text and then swipe to WhatsApp and then swipe to, I don't know, LinkedIn, and then I can go, none of them is finished, right? So yes, I think that's a critical aspect, is learning how to rest even while being functional. And these 4 things, Preetika, nutrition, movement, connection, and rest, that will make the mind more subtle. And you may not have a huge flashy experience, and I'll come back to that in a second, but you will open up more. You will start to see more for sure, no doubt about it. And number 2, when things start to happen, you will be able to integrate it much more in your life, because you will already have the groundwork. You have laid the groundwork. And that's where the society is going. That's a direction we're going in. And we are waking up to that. That's why wellness is popular now. That's why yoga is now an English word. And what are the other ones? There's so many other ones, like mantra, right? Everybody says mantra in the United States, right? It's an English word now. So the fact that these things are coming up is showing us that we're waking up to that. And it's just a matter of, starting to practice these things. It doesn't have to be, don't make it rote, don't make it difficult. Whichever one of these appeals to you, nutrition, movement, connection, and rest, just pick one up and start doing that. And they'll all start to come in at that point.
Wow. Is there any meditation that you practice, or have you been initiated into any particular mantra?
No, I've been meditating on and off since I was a kid, because the Swami G's around me did it. So I did it too. I closed my eyes and I sat there, and I often like visualize things, and then some points in my life I tried to focus super hard on something, and so I've done all kinds of stuff. I used to experiment. Sometimes I would stand in front of a wall, like right in front of it, like half an inch from the wall, and then try to expand my awareness through the wall. I would just play like a kid, which is what we're supposed to do. I never was initiated into anything. I never had a mantra. I don't have, people later would ask me, some people ask me, like, what kind of meditation do you do? I was like, I don't know. I just meditate. Like, I call it meditation, but there's so many flavors of it. Sometimes it's focused intention. Sometimes it's an intense pouring of awareness in a particular place. Sometimes it's diffuse openness. Sometimes it's just utter stillness. Sometimes it's light. Sometimes it's dark. I don't have names for these things. This is just the mind kind of doing what it does.
You sound like the chosen one to me. And here I want to ask you about your experiences with Shirdi Sai Baba.
Oh my God. Yeah. I have to pause when you say that because, one, I feel his presence now. And I just came from Shirdi. I was in Shirdi yesterday. It was my first time. Then I'm getting goosebumps now as I'm talking about him. And this was a few years ago that my son, we went to Virginia Beach for vacation, and there's a spiritual store there. And he was like, oh, Dad, here's his bracelet. He was maybe 8 years old at that time, 7 years old. Here's his bracelet. You should have it. And I was like, okay, let's get one for both of us. So we got it. And on that bracelet, like, there are different pictures. So one is an Om, one is Lakshmi, one is Krishna, one is some, different spiritual pictures, we can say. And one is this guy in white with a white turban on his head, right? And I was like, I've seen this face before. All right, I don't know. Whatever, just kind of forgot about it. And then I had a dream, this a few years ago, in which I was lying in a ditch, and this guy comes, this elderly person runs up to me, and he puts his hands on both sides of my head. And he said, don't worry, from now on, I'll take care of everything. And I just started bawling and bawling and bawling. And I can feel this release and release and release and release coming out. And it's crazy because in words, it's so short. But I think what happened then, and remember, everything else that I said was before that. So this was kind of like a new phase of my life. I think of communicating in a different way and starting to do something different, which I think is going to happen or starting to happen now. And then he showed me, so I had been having experiences of other lifetimes also. Just as a background, I should say that. Times when like I was traumatized, like somebody was either coming after me or something difficult had happened. And that pain is in this lifetime, right? We carry everything, even though, and so when something happens that we don't understand, it's like, oh, why is that happening? Why is this happening? There's a good reason. Maybe it's not obvious, but we're not just one lifetime and done. So it was in this context, he showed me, so he and I imagine that we're standing here, okay? He's here and I'm standing next to him, which is amazing in itself. And we're looking at this scene. And in this scene, I'm riding on a motorbike, and I see these people. So I'm seeing it from two angles. I'm on the motorbike riding, and I'm also here watching. Okay, and so I'm riding the motorbike and driving, and then I see almost like a mob or something.
A mob.
A mob, yeah,
Okay.
or like a throng of people, and I could tell it wasn't good. I couldn't see who I was because it was just my perspective, right? So I couldn't see this body, so I didn't have that context.
This was a dream.
This was in a dream, yes. This was in a dream. For what it's worth, whatever we call a dream, but I'll leave it at that. And then, so these people approach the motorbike and drag me down and start beating me up and all this stuff. And so Sai says to me, like I'm standing next to him, and he's like, don't worry about all that stuff now. It's all taken care of. You don't have to. And again, I felt this like release. And then he said, come, let's go to the stars. And he went up, and the rest is kind of history. Since then, I feel like he is always with me. And in fact, I just came from Shirdi. So I had come to Kashi, and then I went to Shirdi, and I feel like he's always with me, which brings up something else about what we talked about before. Remember how I said I didn't want to talk about it. I didn't really pay attention to this stuff, and I just wanted to integrate and move on. But then I talked about it. So one thing I think it's really important to know is that there are so many kinds of flashy experiences and all those kinds of things. But what endures is your moment to moment experience. I think that's really what counts. The other stuff is cool and great stories, of course. But like right now, sitting with you, like this is the most important thing in the world right now, right? So if I can't be here, and if I can't, all the insight and the stuff that happened in those experiences, if they're not informing this moment, then how good are they really? So I just want the audience to have that perspective that yes, it's fantastic, but everybody can develop that ability to be present now and to open up through nutrition, movement, connection, and rest, to open up that window into this moment. And so I say that because now I feel Sai here. I know Sai is here. He has that light. He has that presence. He has that elevation of an environment. And that to me is even more meaningful than an experience that I had with him, because that endures moment to moment.
Have you seen Sai like come up to you in person?
No, not in what we call the waking state or in what we call the physical world. I have not seen him come up to me, but I see him right now. So another person's physical world or waking state, to me, is a state of projection. So right now, this is a projection, and as part of this projection, I see Sai. Other people see other things, and to each their own.
Any other experience with Shiri Sai Baba?
I would just give, I guess, like what people might consider a mundane one, but just alleviation of pain that happens like moment to moment. Like if there's some pain, like somewhere in the body or something's happened, like one can just bring light into that area and it just kind of resolves, right? So that's one aspect that happens all the time. But the other thing I wanted to mention is that, before before he came and is helping me, there's a lot of horsepower in the things that I was doing. I mean, there was a lot of, because there was so much karma, there was so much samskaras, there was so much coming through from other lifetimes, so many things opening up. It was exhausting. It's tiring to live in this, let's say, dimension or this world when something has shifted like that. It requires a lot of energy to stay balanced, to integrate these worlds. To go to the Himalayas and do that, not as much energy, in my opinion, because you can stay in a different energy, right? But to integrate, to try to live that frequency in this frequency, what you have to do is bring them together, which is what we're doing now, right? By sharing this, that's what I'm doing, is trying to bring these together. So that requires a lot of effort. There's a lot of work in that. There's a lot of sadhana in that. That's constant. And he coming in has lightened that by more than 50%. It's just like, oh, I can like rest a little bit because he's doing so much of the work now. Probably 80% he's doing. So it's, that's something real and tangible that's huge.
I think maybe I should also speak about one such experience that I had with Shiri Sai Baba.
Uh-huh.
So I think this was when I was shooting for my Tamil movie, and I had a little bit of an accident on the set where I literally, I hit my head very hard, and I immediately rushed in for a CT scan. But before doing that, I just prayed to Baba and I said that if everything goes fine, I will visit you in Shirdi and I will give you, and I don't know why this thought came in my mind. I said, I'll give you a coconut, which is the nariyal we call it nariyal, and a betel leaf with 2 betel nuts. I don't know. I could have said, I'll give you, like sweets or, put the chadar or, I could have said anything, but I don't know why this random coconut betel leaf and 2 betel nuts came into my mind. And then everything was fine. The reports were normal and I had to visit Shirdi. And what was happening was that I think I visited Shirdi about 3 to 4 months after this experience. And until I visited Shirdi, trust me, every few days I would get, hit on my head,
Yeah.
almost like a reminder.
Classic.
You need to, yeah, like you need to get there, because you have taken a vow. And then I finally get there, and we get into the mandir, and where, just behind the murti, behind the idol of Baba, there is a room. And it's like a private room, and there were people sitting there, and I was also there. And there was this huge painting of Baba, and I don't know, probably it was hand painted. And what I see is Baba sitting. It's the typical iconic picture of Baba sitting with,
The foot up and
exactly, with a coconut, a betel leaf, and 2 betel nuts. I mean, I was like, how, did I think of it, and why? So that was a mystery.
Those are like, that's like quintessential Sai Baba. Like that's what he does. He put those words in your mind. He told you what to bring, and I mean, I've seen that over and over and over and over. And you're very fortunate and you're blessed, because once you enter that space, you don't leave, and you get so much help in so many ways, often unrecognized. So
There was one more experience that I had. So the previous place where I lived, that place had, so the washroom suddenly developed some problem with the knob. So if you got in, you would get locked, and you would have to depend on somebody else who's outside to open the door for you. And this just randomly occurred. Everything was fine, it just randomly started happening. And my mom was a little worried, and she was like, just be careful, because if there is a chance, if somebody is not at home, you're all alone, and if this happens, then you'll be stuck. And that's exactly what happened. That day my mom was not there, she was with my grandmother. Now my grandmother lived about 10 minutes away, and I got stuck. And I just prayed to Baba, and I said that it was about, I think, maybe 12 p.m. And I prayed to Baba saying that, okay, now it was a large washroom. It had a balcony attached. So there was like ventilation, and, I could like easily sit there for maybe 5 to 6 hours. So I had two choices: either I panic or I just sit calm. And I said, okay, let me just sit calm and pray. And I prayed, and I just told Baba, please tell my mom I'm stuck.
wait, let me ask you quickly, was this after you went to Shirdi or before?
This was much after I went to Shirdi, because I've been to Shirdi when I was in school.
Okay.
And I prayed to Baba, and then within, I think, 35-40 minutes, my mom walks in, and she opens the door, and she says, I was cooking in your grandma's house, and something just flashed in my mind, saying, she's got stuck, and I called you, you didn't pick up your phone, so I rushed here and I opened the door for you.
Yeah.
I think definitely, I believe in miracles and these entities and the way they connect with you. It's very strong, but I think you should first establish the connection yourself.
Yes. I mean, that's a key part of it. And anybody can. Anybody can set the stage for that. The biggest part of it, honestly, I think it is not the practices and the exercises. It's simply knowing that it's possible.
Right.
Like hearing the stories, hearing people who are emergency doctors, and like people having these experiences and integrating in their life and changing them, and having it being completely consistent with science. If you understand the subjective objective lens, you change the lens, you change the perception. How do you change the lens? Well, there's an entire science. There are many sciences for that in the Indian tradition. So it's all well established. And once you know that's possible, then that opens a door.
This was a wonderful conversation with you. If people want to connect with you, I would like you to tell them how they can connect. Is there a website?
You can visit healthrevolution.org. that's my work that's now beginning, and that I think Sai is a part of, and why he's helping me, because it's a big venture. We're trying to build a complete ecosystem for healing, healing in every sense of the word. And so that's at healthrevolution.org. You can contact me through there. Just go to the contact form and you can check out all the stuff on the website.
Sure, nice. And there are 2 books that you have written. Yes. Where can people read them and get access to them?
You can get them at the bookstore or on Amazon. You can get them both, Is This a Dream and Michelangelo's Medicine. If you're more into the philosophy, spirituality, reconciling, like if you want to reconcile these worlds, like the mystical, the spiritual, the philosophical, the scientific, the daily experience, and you want to see that it's actually all makes sense, then Is This a Dream is the book for you. If you want to hear about some of my experiences with patients in my training in emergency medicine and how that shaped me, then you can get some good stories in Michelangelo's Medicine.
Nice. Thank you, Doctor, for being here. If you have any suggestions, comments for this interview, please put it down. If you have your own experiences, you can put it down. We're both going to read it. And the website is here, and follow us. Follow me on Instagram. You can follow Dr. Kumar on his Instagram page too. Lots of love. Bye.